Myth number 34 that beginner fish keepers don't know. Dwarf gouramis aren't exactly great community fish. And you may say, what? But the internet told me that they're docile fish that go great in peaceful community tanks, and you should get a school of at least 4 of them. Well, I can only speak from my own experience, as well as at the Aquariumcoop fish store, we have sold these things for years and years and years. First of all, I totally get why you want to take a dwarf gourami home. They only get about, 3 inches long. They have this really cool oblong pancake kind of body shape, and then they've got really cool ventral fins that are modified to act kind of like whiskers or feeler fins, helping them to navigate the world. Plus, they're very, very colorful. Like, even the regular version is already this amazing neon blue iridescent body with very striking red-orange vertical stripes going up and down on them. And then they've kind of line bred a couple of varieties from that. So there's a version where it has no stripes at all, so the entire body is blue, so that's the powder blue dwarf gourami. And then the flame dwarf gourami would be the entire body is red orange, and then the neon blue shows up in their fins. In my experience, dwarf gouramis are pretty hardy and beginner friendly. And the reason why is kind of like betta fish, they are also labyrinth fish or anabantoids, meaning they have a labyrinth organ that's kind of lung-like in its capacity, where it allows the fish to gulp oxygen directly from the air. This allows them to live in shallow, oxygen-deprived waters. Plus, they come from South Asian countries like India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, and these areas experience seasonal monsoons. So you can bet that they're used to experiencing like drastic changes in water parameters, such as in temperature, pH, GH, and so on. The question I hear a lot though is people saying, well, I'm really afraid to get a dwarf gourami because the internet says that they're really prone to iridovirus dwarf gourami disease, which is a viral disease that is pretty impossible to cure, at least for the normal hobbyist, and it has a very high mortality rate. All I can say is we personally at the store, we have bought thousands and thousands of dwarf gouramis, and we personally have not encountered this disease. That being said, we sometimes do get batches that have some genetic deformities from overbreeding. So I would just say, when you go to the fish store, just make sure to look at it, make sure it's healthy, it's swimming well, it doesn't have like a bent back or it's missing fins or anything like that before you choose one to bring home. As for the tank setup, dwarf gouramis come from like slow-moving ditches and waterways, not a lot of fast flow, a lot of dense vegetation though. So I'd really appreciate, I'd say a 10-gallon at least aquarium size with lots of live plants, definitely slow flow for your filtration. And then for water parameters, really wide range, like pH from 6 to 8, temperatures of 72 to 82 degrees Fahrenheit, and really GH anything from soft to hard water. Should you keep them in a school? Well, they're kind of like betta fish. They get pretty territorial, especially the males, and the problem is at the pet store, they mostly sell only males because they're the more colorful ones. So you can just imagine putting a tank full of males together, they're gonna chase and bite and bully each other. Like maybe if you had a huge enough aquarium where each of the males could set up their own territory and not really see each other, but for the most part, we usually recommend that you just get one as maybe the centerpiece fish, and then maybe along with some other tank mates. Even if you only get one dwarf gourami, again, they're kind of like betta fish where it really depends on the individual personality. Like some are totally chill and mellow, won't bother anybody. Others get, kind of aggressive, feisty during mealtime, and then others just like to attack fish. So I've kept lots of dwarf gouramis in my hobby, and I would say it's been about 50-50 in terms of the number that can live in a community tank versus the ones that would just attack everything. Like a lot of times you'll hear people say, oh, well, dwarf gouramis, they'll attack other colorful fish that are on the top layer of the aquarium just like them because, again, the territory issue. But I honestly had a dwarf gourami that would attack Corydorus catfish, which is on the bottom of the tank and not very brightly colored. So it really depends, kind of try it at your own risk. This is kind of why we decided to sell mostly female powder blue dwarf gouramis, just because females, they have a slightly milder temperament, but they're still very colorful, at least that variety, just like the males. If your dwarf gourami does happen to be one of a more peaceful personality, then yes, you can put them with normal community fish, such as the Cory catfish, the tetras, rasporas, maybe loaches, platies, so on and so forth, they will opportunistically eat anything that can fit in their mouths. So dwarf shrimp, baby fish, so on and so forth. Speaking of which, let's talk about food. Usually people say that labyrinthfish or anabantoids like to hang out in the top half of the aquarium, but honestly my dwarf gouramis swim everywhere, so they don't really seem to care whether it's floating or sinking food. Honestly, they're very eager eaters, not picky at all, so you may have to watch out that they don't like outcompete some of the slower species during mealtime. Maybe get something that spreads all around a little more easily so everybody gets a bite. But yeah, they'll eat anything. I think the main thing to remember is make sure to feed a wide variety of foods just so that they get plenty of different kinds of nutrients and vitamins and minerals to stay strong and healthy. So I feed them frozen bloodworms, daphnia, brine shrimp. I'll feed the freeze-dried versions of those, as well as really any kind of prepared community foods. So fish flakes, pellets, betta pellets, they'll eat those. Rapashi gel food, I've seen mine go after that as well, and of course live foods. I know I mentioned a lot of protein high content foods, but they will actually also go after algae sometimes in your aquarium, which is pretty cool. If you've never bred a bubble nester before, it's so fun. Dwarf gouramis are one of the easier ones to breed. I would say my greatest challenge would be trying to find a female. I'm not like an expert at sexing them, but usually the males have a more pointy end to their dorsal fin versus the females have a more rounded end to it. Yeah, you just condition them like any other fish, feed them lots of good food, and then I like to set up a separate breeding tank, like a 10-gallon for the pair. Maybe fill up the water to 6 to 8 inches, and then some hobbyists like to cover the entire top of the tank, even if it has a lid, with saran wrap just to keep the humidity really, really high, because apparently it helps with the development of the newborn Dwarf gourami's labyrinth organs. I would say slow flow, obviously a sponge filter is my favorite. I keep the temperature kind of on the warmer end of the spectrum, and then lots of floating plants. The males like to use it to kind of anchor their bubble nest against it. And so yeah, you'll know when they're ready, when the male is making a bubble nest, he's courting the female, they're gonna embrace each other, and then you'll see this little puff of, it looks like white sand grains, but those are the tiny little eggs. The male will, it looks like he's eating them, but he'll gather them up in his mouth and then spit them back out in his bubble nest. They'll do that several times, and then at some point the male will start viciously chasing the female away, and that's when you know, go ahead and scoop the female out. He is focused totally on guarding this nest, and he will continue to guard them for the next few days until they hatch and they're fully free swimming. At that point, you can go ahead and net the male out as well so he doesn't accidentally predate on his own young. And yeah, just feed them really tiny foods, things like infusoria, live vinegar eels, you know, powdered fry food, Sarah Micron is one of my favorites, so on and so forth. I would say for, again, depending on the water temperature, you'll probably do that for about a couple of weeks until they're big enough to finally take baby brine shrimp. That is like liquid gold when it comes to breeding their fish, and it's really gonna help them grow strong and fast because of that nutritious yolk sac that the baby brine shrimp have. If you have fallen in love with gouramis like I have and want to learn about some other peaceful species that you can keep, check out Corey's top 5 list over here. Otherwise, enjoy Nature Daily, and I'll see you next time.